You're listening to the Modern Life Mystic Woman podcast, hosted by Jen Neville and Taiha Lee.
Modern Life Mystic Woman started as a conversation about writing, dreaming, dating, magic, God, tarot, astrology, and our mutual passion for consciously creating both spiritually fulfilling and totally luxurious lifestyles.
We're all about living in alignment, being tapped in AF, and going all in on Ascension. We're committed to intuition, inspiration, and creation.
We are the bold and the spiritual, and we're moving cosmic mountains together.
Okay, so here we are. We have listened to everybody's requests, everybody who joined us in the live video. We had so much fun with you guys. We are here. We finally decided to start this podcast. We both had kind of been interested in starting this type of platform. And I feel like with all the quarantine stuff, this has been a perfect time. And we're so happy to be here with you guys. Anybody who's listening to us for the first time, my name is Jen.
And I'm Taiha.
And we are basically both working in the realm of spirituality, light workers, working in different veins, but also on a shared path, shared mission. And we're here to just have fun with you guys and kind of give you an inside look at our lives, an inside look at our experiences, how we have gone through our own ascension processes, and how we have managed to create our own spiritual businesses, what we've learned along the way, and just have fun with you guys, share some of our fun stories and our own battles through this trying time.
Yeah, and we're all in this together right now. You know, what a beautiful time when the world is kind of shut down, and it's almost like, you know, we've been on this spiritual path our whole life, and now it really seems like the rest of the world is kind of being forced to catch up a little bit. And, you know, everyone's being faced with like so many different layers of themselves, and either we can use this time to our benefit, which we're advocates for, you know, and that's really going to be the way out of this, like to just really expand all of us together. And yeah, I think that's like kind of what we've both been doing, and how we got to this point was having this like extra space and container of time, and like, what are we going to do with this?
Totally. And it's funny because we've been in this quarantine now for over a month. I think the last time I went out was March 15th for a friend of mine's birthday, and that's when it was kind of everything was starting to get shut down. That was like the final weekend before everything got shut down. But things were starting to slow down. And this is kind of how we got linked, was basically, which I have to first interject that before all this happened, from January, I was doing like tarot readings for myself, and I was having friends read for me. And I kept seeing this person coming into my life. They're going to come into your life and they're going to offer you something. This is somebody who, like, it would literally come out, this is somebody who watches you from a distance. So I'm thinking, okay, who do I have in my life that's stalking me, that's doing all this stuff? They're going to offer me a business opportunity. This is going to be, yeah, it was wild.
And this was in January?
This was like starting around December, January. I kept seeing this person who's going to come into my life. That devil card kept popping up, and Taiha's a Capricorn and I'm Virgo, just in case anybody didn't know. But Capricorn's represented by the devil, and I just kept seeing the devil. I'm like, oh my God, is this going to be a toxic person? Like, or it's a Capricorn, and I had dated a Capricorn at one point. So I'm like, oh my God, he's going to come back from the past. He's been watching me. But then it was kind of, it just clicked on me, I think today, because I'm like, oh my God, watches me from a distance. You live in Canada.
Yeah.
You live on the opposite side of the country, and I'm in Florida. So it's like, Oh, it all makes sense to me now. And you were following me on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then I had been actually following you because normally sometimes like I always take note of the people who follow me who make themselves public to following me. So I
Okay.
had been following you, but mine are private. And then you followed me on Instagram and you sent me a message. You did a nice little slide into the DMs. And then from there, we were talking because I was like, oh my gosh, how coincidental. I'm in the process of writing. I'm in the process of kind of getting back into that creative space. And you are someone who coaches people on writing and how to get creative with their words. So it's just funny how it all turned out. And here we are starting kind of an opportunity together that we're hoping grows into something that is really amazing and build a community.
Oh, I
So
already feel it so deeply. Like I just feel it, you know?
yeah, totally. And we kind of were, so I was doing sessions and then they were like hour long, hour and a half long sessions. And then afterwards we were just staying, and because I mean, we're in quarantine. I'm not really seeing anybody at this point. I'm not hanging out with my friends. So we'd stay on the Zoom call for like an hour, 2 hours. I think one day was like 4 hours, and we were just talking
Long
about
time.
all this esoteric, like existential stuff. And I think that's where we were like, oh my gosh, we need to be recording this. We need to make a podcast because this stuff is too much fun and we're getting like carried away and talking for hours about stuff. So that's been kind of fun and unexpected, but that's why never force it to be romantic. Never force the readings don't have to be romantic. Sometimes it can be,
That's
you
such
know,
advice.
new friendships, partnerships. But yeah, I thought that was so funny. And I remember thinking like when we were talking for all this time, I'm like, oh my God, she probably wants to go. She probably wants to do other things. And here I am just chatting away.
No, and I'm like, oh my God, I love this. Like, well, and part of, big part of the work that I do in terms of like coaching people to write is like really pulling out their stories, like things, we all have these stories that like we don't really give a lot of credit to, but we all have these like really amazing stories that with the right encouragement and with the right support, like pulling those stories out of you. And then like for anybody who, wants to, whether it's have a spiritual business or anything, like we're all in the realm of like relationships and connection, right? So the more that we can learn to craft our stories, like the more we're going to be able to share our messages. And I mean, really that's the only reason we're able to, be on this recording, this podcast right now, is because we're practicing the art of storytelling and speaking on a regular basis. And so, when I'm kind of pulling these stories out of Jen about her childhood and, how she learned about like magic from her abuela and like all these really cool stories. And I'm like, on the inside, I'm like, oh my God, I want to tell her about all of my things too, because we have like all these similar qualities in common. And yeah, so it's just really powerful the way that we can kind of, like you said, like don't make things more difficult and kind of like trust the path of least resistance, like kind of surrender to these like connections that are coming in your life. And I mean, really at the end of the day, our intention has been to like have fun and
Yeah,
it gets to be easy.
exactly. And that's been something I've learned over the last few years too. It's just, or the last year in particular, it's been less about romantic connections and so much more about the friendships I've made. So, and I think there's a quote, it's like, make your friendships more romantic and your romantic relationships more friendly. So I think that's something that's been awesome. But I've loved, this has been one of the things that has kept me sane throughout this quarantine, is basically just getting on here and like getting on our Zoom calls and talking about this stuff and providing a space, honestly, because I can't really talk about this with some of the people in my life. And, you know, I was telling you about dimensional stuff, which we'll talk about on some podcasts, like some really existential stuff, and you were just there like, oh, okay. I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Like so into it.
Yeah. But yeah, so we're so excited to be here and talk about all this stuff. So I guess today, because one of the most common questions I tend to get, or I feel like anybody who's into spirituality, they always want to know, like, how did you get into this? When were you introduced to this? And
Yeah.
I feel like we both probably have similar stories but different, so it'd be fun to kind of share that. So is there like a particular moment in time that you felt you were introduced to this lifestyle?
Yeah. Which perfect segue, because I feel like that's one of the, we were kind of introduced in a similar way in terms of dream interpretation. That was definitely like, I grew up as a young child, just like always having a dream book beside the bed. And so like ever since I could read, I had been interpreting dreams, which, you know, dream symbolism is like, symbols are like the language of like how we interpret like deep esoteric meaning. And so that was definitely dream interpretation was definitely like one of the first things that I was taught, and really just, yeah, like really, it's really deeply ingrained in me, the ability to know what symbols mean, even if I don't, like, in quotes, like, know what they mean. It's like,
Yeah.
know what they mean.
Yeah, well, knowing what they mean and then also going based off the feeling, because I used to look at dream journals, and then it's kind of, sometimes you just have a knowing of what that was in your dream and why it was there. But I'm interested, you say you were taught that, so then who taught you about dream interpretation?
Yeah, so that was definitely my mom. She had me really young, so she was always like the cool young mom. And she was definitely my you know, spiritual mentor, initiator, from a very young age. I remember between the ages of 5 to 7, at some point in there, like it was around the time that I could start to read. And my first major like esoteric experience was her teaching me how to play with a Ouija board. At a very, very young age, which, you know, to some people might sound like kind of extreme, but
Yeah.
it honestly, like, this really is the story that just, it really made me like who I was, and really set the trajectory of my life. um and I guess, like, we're just like, that's what this podcast is about, right? Is like
Yeah.
sharing the real stories. And I'm not gonna lie, like, there's part of me that feels some anxiety or like fear of just really sharing this, but at the same time, it's like, it so needs to be like talked about and shared. You know, and that's like one of my overall intentions for this show, is
Yeah.
like, by you guys listening, it's almost like, you know, we have nerves, we have like anxiety of like sharing some of these stories, but it's like, by us facing our fears, like, we hope to give you confidence to, you know, share your stories as well. um
Or just know that your stories are totally common. You're not alone. Everybody's been through it. I've had my own Ouija board experience. I grew up, my grandmother, my abuela, half Dominican, so I spent a lot of time in the Dominican Republic. Um, I grew up in that Latin culture where it was very much like bruja magic, and there's dark energies and bad spirits. And as I've gotten older, I have really changed my outlook on this. But there was one, like, I grew up with the notion that Ouija boards are not something you mess around with. You don't, like, that's opening a portal. But of course, I did it. I did it when I was like, I've played with a Ouija board twice, and I was with somebody who I felt very safe with doing so. And the first time it kind of freaked me out a little bit, but then the second time it was a really, kind of fun experience. Not fun. It was also a little bit frightening, but it was more significant, which, I want to hear your Ouija board story. But so anybody who's listening to this, who's like, that's dark magic or that's whatever, I get it. I grew up with that belief too, but it's only evil or negative if you give it the power to be. So I just want to preface that before we tell any Ouija board stories.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really important to talk about. And I'm sure definitely in another show, I'd love to get into like the difference between black magic and white magic and
Yeah.
all that stuff means. So basically like I'm this like little kid with my mom with the Ouija board, and she was very sacred and intentional with it. Like, you have to ask it if it wants to play. It was like she would set up the whole environment very like special. So again, that was kind of my initiation too of setting up sacred space, which is like what I'm so deeply passionate about. And she asked me like, Taiha, if you want to know it's real, ask a question in your mind, and then you'll know basically like I'm not pushing it. Like, you'll see what the answer goes to. So, I tell this story. It's like, well, what's one question like every little kid wants to know? Or maybe this was just me like born skeptic, but I asked in my head, like, is Santa real?
Yeah.
And it went to no. And I remember this moment, like, it engraved in my mind. And I looked up at my mom and she's like, so what did you ask? And I'm like,
oh my goodness. Did you tell her?
I did. I'm like, I asked if Santa's real. And this moment is like, I remember her looking at me, and like she had to make a decision in that split second. Like, was she going to be fully in integrity and be honest with me, or was she going to, like, what was she gonna do? I mean, she was already playing a Ouija board with me as like a little kid. So
yeah. So then what did she do? She was just like, no, sweetie.
She looked at me and she just like nodded her head and she was like, yeah, like, that's right. And so the reason this story is so powerful for me is because this taught me so many things at one time. Like, it taught me as like a very young child that we could access information and like truth to an extent through the unseen realm, which was like so powerful. And that's like what it's just like, I know that to be true in my core.
Yeah.
And it also taught me, to notice the outside world then, as being a little kid, and then observing like all of my friends who still believed in this, kind of like manufactured tale that, most of us all grow up with. It also just gave me this lens to look through the world as in terms of like mind control, essentially, and how the mass population can be controlled by what they're told, which then totally led me on a kind of parallel path to all this esoteric stuff, this parallel path of like conspiracies and mind control and brainwashing and like cult behavior. And like, I'm getting goosebumps as I talk about this stuff because I'm so fascinated with those topics and how they merge together. So that was like really my like first, like, that was my major like initiation for sure.
Well, and also props to your mom for not robbing you of, because she could have easily lied to you there, and then she would have been giving you Santa but robbing you of, this whole world and this whole kind of how you explained it, like this whole world that's out there that to be true. Imagine if that would have gone differently. Imagine if she would have said, oh no, the board is wrong. Then you would have always doubted. You would have always doubted the esoteric. So just had to chime in because that's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, I love that. And I know we're going to get into this in another show, but this really connects to karmic relationships for me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, my mom doesn't play a huge role in my life anymore and hasn't in about the last 12, 13 years. But that's how I know so deeply, like this magical part was like so deeply like our karmic relationship, and that like I chose her to be my mom at that very young age to initiate me into these things, so that like, that's my path, and that's what I'm here to teach and to share, and that I think can give us a lot of meaning and direction and like peace in our life also when things aren't maybe going as easy.
Yeah, and that's such a great way to look at it. Some kind of, you know, everybody's our teacher, but yeah, I feel like that to me kind of gives me chills, because I'm like, wow, she could have easily told you the opposite, and then you would have always doubted esoteric stuff, because you would have easily been like, I mean, until you found out Santa was actually not real. Eventually we're going to find out, but
Yeah.
so then everybody's just a liar.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm so grateful for that. And, you know, that's probably one of the big reasons too. I just like integrity and radical honesty is something I just so deeply value, because I think we can get so much further faster with
Yeah.
that integrity and honesty. I think, you know, that's again, one of the intentions of this podcast is just like being so real with you guys.
Yeah, totally. I know. I don't think I have like a significant story. I was always fascinated by, I mean, we also have that link of where we're only children. I have a half sister, but we never grew up together. She's 22 years older than I am. So I basically grew up an only child, as did you. So I had to really rely on kind of my imagination, and I would read a lot of books. I was always kind of into knowledge and being around older people. So I kind of would always be around my mom. I would be around my grandmother. And I would always hear them talking about these like ghosts, and, oh, I saw so and so. And like she would always have these like reactions if something was in the room, and it kind of just fascinated me. So I always loved talking to her. I still love talking to her, and we talk about these things to this day. But it's kind of, she initiated me into that world. And yeah, I feel like it's so much fun in Latin culture too. Most people, especially being from the islands, and everybody's a little bit spiritual. So I was always taught to kind of talk about my dreams, talk about premonitions that I had. And it wasn't like, oh, you're just a stupid little kid. Like, she kind of would build me up and be like, telling my grandfather, like, oh, did you hear that? Did you hear that? She's so powerful. She knows. And then so I kind of grew up with this feeling of like, yeah, I'm powerful. I know.
Yeah.
But kind of what I was telling you at one point was that's what helped me build such a great connection with my own intuition, and a great trust in myself and God and the universe. And just knowing, like, I know when that voice comes into my head, I know what that is. I know it's like that premonition feeling. It's that message that's coming through. And I think it's so interesting to note here, anybody who's trying to get into this kind of stuff, it's important to note that it doesn't, because even if we're talking about ghosts, say ghost, I have my own take on ghosts, but sometimes I'll see something out of the corner of my eye, and it's like I'm so connected with my third eye that if I just see that like person passing by, I can read their energy to tell you this person has long dark hair, they're tan, they're this, oh, and they're here for you. And I'm not a seer. I don't claim to be, but sometimes if an energy is powerful enough, it will show itself to me. And that's when I'm like, okay, somebody wants to talk to you. And it's just interesting. So it's kind of like, you think you're going to see this person just standing in the corner of the room looking at you. No, at least that's not how I see. And that's not how I receive messages. Sometimes I'll receive wordings, or I'll receive like messages that are kind of spliced, or pictures. I'll see pictures. It's interesting. So just trust what you're seeing, I guess. That's my best advice for anybody who's trying to tap into their intuition. It's like, at first, trust that what you're seeing isn't just, it's like, oh, why did that bird pop into my mind? Or why is that bird in the corner over there? Like, it all has significance. It all has meanings.
And I love that you're making that distinction for people of like, because how we do see things is totally different, right? And so I think it's like anything, don't try and like force yourself to be clairvoyant if what you get is like you actually like audibly hear messages, right? Like trust however whatever's coming most natural to you, and then like kind of go all in on that.
Totally. And when you exercise that muscle, it becomes more like clear cut, and that's kind of what we talked about in the live, clearing your channels, when it comes. Like, for example, one day I saw a pigeon on my neighbor's balcony, and I thought, I said to myself, I said, he wants to talk to me. He's going to message me about something. And this is somebody who never gets in communication with me. And
wait, are you talking about the pigeon?
The pigeon was sitting on his balcony. So I was like, oh, that guy who lives there wants to talk to me. Oh. I don't know. I just felt that. And I was like, forgot it. And then this guy never reaches out to me. 4 days later, sends me some cryptic message of like, are you home? I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
So it's like, sometimes when you practice it enough, you will become so in tune with like nature and weird things that happen that you'll be like, that's a message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a easy way for people to start tapping in, is like seeing the signs of something like repetitive showing up.
Yeah.
And even if you don't know what it means, like ask it, what are
you Yeah, it's I love that you said that, because it's like, anything you want to be revealed to you, ask.
Yeah.
Ask, because it will.
One of my favorite prompts to ask myself all the time is like, when, like if you're, okay, so those of you who are listening, like imagine almost like the Two of Swords, right? The girl with the two swords, she can't make up her mind. She's feeling kind of like split decision. And it's like, we all have situations like that come up of like, maybe it's like choosing between like two lovers or two jobs or like two places to live or literally whatever it is. And you really don't know. And then asking yourself, but what would I do if I did know? And just like continuing to ask yourself that prompt, like, what would I do if I did know? And it's like, it's so simple, but it can give you so much clarity.
Well, and also to add with the Two of Swords, the biggest thing about her is that she's blindfolded. She knows the answer to the question. She just doesn't want to face it.
Oh, I love that.
So actually, it's kind of, so it ties in perfectly to what you're saying, because, she knows the answer. She just doesn't want to remove the blindfold and look at it. So that fits perfectly with when you want an answer to a question, all you have to do is ask. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting. I never thought about that from the Two of Swords. So I love that you talked about that. Whenever I see her with the blindfold on, I always think, when you're split between those two decisions or whatever it is, like, it's almost like she's looking inward because she has the blindfold on. It's like, it's when you have to trust your intuition and almost like, not be distracted with like the outside world and instead like go inward.
Yeah. Oh, I like that too. Yeah.
And this is just, again, this is such a great, this is great advice to share for those of you who are maybe wanting to get into tarot or this stuff, interpreting symbols, right? Like that's what the tarot is you're interpreting these visuals in however they come up to you. And it's like, let your imagination like paint this story for you.
Totally. And that's what I always recommend people, like, sit down with each card, get to know it. What does it represent to you? Because what it represents to me does you absolutely no good, because then you're trying to read based off my intuition, which is kind of, I always tell people, and that's like what I see so much on the channel, is everybody knows what the meanings of the cards are. So they're like, that's not what that means. It means this. And I'm like, you're not reading the cards right now.
Right.
And that's why I go to other psychics. That's why I go to other readers, because sometimes I want a different perspective. And I never sit there and think like, that's not what that is. I know what that is. It's like, no, that's their reading. I'm not the one reading the cards.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my recommendation for people, is like, assess your own understanding, your own feelings about the card, based off of, what you see. And then you can know what the actual meaning of it is, but like, how does it make you feel?
Yeah, I love that. And that's why we invest in going to readers, to get them to help us see things that we aren't seeing. Like, we get so locked in our own reality of like, no, this is the way it is, and very
Yeah.
controlling,
Yeah, totally. It's like, why did you come here?
Yeah, exactly.
But I've had very good, very open-minded people who have come to me for readings, which I've manifested totally. But yeah, it's kind of that, I know when I go to get my tarot cards read, or I go to get a reading from somebody, I always stay really open-minded. So it's like, when they're telling me like, that's not your guy, and I'm like, oh no, I want him to be, but I don't. I'm like, okay, we'll see. Because I never believe it when they say it, and I'm like, all right, we'll see.
Right.
I'm like, sure, I'm hearing you. And then I go get like my heart shattered into a million pieces, and they're like, what did we tell you?
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I feel like there's so much fun you can have with all this like esoteric stuff. It's can be entertainment, even though it is so very real. It's like, it just opens you up to this fun world, I feel like. And that's my take on it, is like being able to tap into these places with inside yourself, different worlds, and be able to kind of pull that into your present reality. I just feel like it's fun. Spirituality is fun.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that that's what's, come up a lot in your sessions, is this whole like bringing the inner child, love of like fantasy and imagination and play into all of that.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking about this morning. I was just randomly kind of like thinking about like meditation, and just thinking how, some people really struggle to meditate, or they're like, oh, I really should meditate. And I was just kind of having that topic kind of swim in my mind this morning. And I was like, what would actually make it fun, or like what would change this perspective, rather than almost like, oh, I should meditate so I'll be more relaxed? Like, that doesn't really sound that fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, we know we all need it, and then kind of what that connected to for me was like thinking about when I really started meditating on a regular basis, which was probably about 4 years ago. I had been stream of consciousness writing for many years before that, which I've found super powerful, and I'm sure we'll get into in another show. But that tends to be much more like active for me, versus meditation is much more like still. But I was thinking how like the fun part of meditating is like that you're able to access these other dimensions where like your ideal life already exists. So I would love to prompt or inspire those who are listening who maybe don't have like, a meditation practice, like shift your perspective a little bit and make it more fun, and that it gets to be like this really fun experience for you, and how you actually manifest like the reality that you want.
Yeah, that's so funny that you say that, because yesterday, and I've been meditating for a long time now, because playing golf, it was like that
Mm.
was just some part of my pre-round routine, that I'd sit in the car for 15 minutes, do a quick meditation, hop out, do my thing. But what I do love to do, and I go to like Reiki circles where they put us into meditation, or I go into meditation things. And that's really fun, because when you're with a bunch of other people's energy, if you can really let yourself dip into that meditation, I have gone to other worlds. I've had out of body experiences. So that'll have to be a whole nother episode.
Yeah.
But it's funny that you say the alternate reality, because last night I was just surfing YouTube. I honestly, during this quarantine, I haven't even been watching Netflix. I just watch all these like spiritual videos. And then so I was looking at like an Aaron Doughty. That's how you say his name, right?
I think
Doughty.
so. Yeah.
He popped up in my recommendeds, and it was one about like quick meditation to put you in an alternate reality. So
Oh,
I was like,
okay. It was
oh,
last night.
nice. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, let me try this. So I sat there and did it. I felt super relaxed. And it's like so great because they're guiding you through it. So I always recommend those to people who are just starting out with the
Mhm.
meditations. He's guiding you through it, and he's kind of explaining what it really means to shift into an alternate reality. I'm not going to try and explain it, but it was basically setting an intention for the reality you want to be in. And I was like, yeah, I really felt so zen afterwards. I don't know if, maybe I am in that alternate reality, who knows? But I think that it can be fun when you do meditations like that, and then manifesting money or manifesting this, and then it's so much fun when it actually, like 3 weeks down the road, you finally notice, you're like, oh my God, my reality really did shift.
Yeah. And like, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because it's like, oftentimes it can feel like the reality that we want, especially maybe for those of you who are listening. And, we've been there as well. There's definitely been some dark nights of the soul that I've had on this path for sure. And, if you're in a place right now, especially during quarantine, a lot of people are maybe like struggling at home, or like they want to like upgrade their living environment or make more money, or like just upgrade their life in, a more positive way. Like, you might kind of feel like, oh, well, what the F is meditating going to do for like upgrading my life? Like, no, I need to go get a better job. I need to make more money, all these things. But it's like, when you actually though start this practice, the thing that I always say is like, when you can visualize something over and over and over again in your mind, it's like, that's like doing the heavy lifting. That's like doing the energy work to actually get your physical body in alignment to then go take action in the material world. And then it's so much easier.
Yeah, totally. Because it's not like you're going to meditate and then you're going to open your eyes and you're in like your mansion, you're driving nice car. Doesn't change like that, but it's like you finally feel freed up, and it could take practice to get there, but you begin to feel freed up from that voice in your head that says like you can't do it. Like, you free yourself from your ego and you start really living more in an inspired action type of place. So yeah, I think meditation is, you're right, it's one of those things that you kind of have to just do it because you want to feel at peace. Just do it because you want to implement something positive into your routine. But also, it's like you don't have to sit crisscross applesauce and like put your fingers into little loops. Sometimes it's just, some mornings I do meditation by just laying in my bed,
Mhm.
laying in my bed an extra 15 minutes and just focusing on breath, focusing on my present moment. And then I start my day, in a good space.
Totally. There's so many ways that we can
Yeah.
access these like kind of alternate dimensions to, yeah, bring in that peace in our day-to-day life. And I think that's really the thing that we want to share is like, whatever works for you, like make
Yeah.
it fun, make it like a party. Like honestly, like my best meditations are, you know, I most of the time I do sit kind of on the ground, but I'll listen to music and I'll just like play
Yeah.
a really dope beat on repeat, and I'll just like visualize, or I'll let visions come to me of like, you know, what's next for me. And a big part of it is like kind of like prompting yourself with questions. And for me personally, I'm very visual, like clairvoyant,
Yeah.
really my main ability, I would say. But again, however you access information, but it's kind of just designating some form of sacred ritual with yourself on a regular basis.
Exactly. And I remember a funny story. I was seeing this guy and he came to visit me, and normally I would go stay with him. He came to visit me one time and he was staying with me. And I remember like my morning routine is I'll make a smoothie and I'll sit and I won't look at my phone. I won't get on my computer. I just sit there and I'll just be that's kind of my meditation process, my waking up process. Now I do intermittent fasting, but back in the day I drink my smoothie and I just sit there and take my sweet ass time. And I remember he'd just sit there looking at me and be like, "Are you just gonna sit there? Like, what are you doing? Like, do we need to make a plan? Do we need to go somewhere?" And I just look at him like, "Oh my God, stop talking right now." And he'd get so frustrated with me, but then finally he'd realize, and by like the third day, he was like, "You sit and drink your smoothie. I'm gonna make all the plans for the day." Like he just got to the point where he was like, "Okay, this is a thing." She just sits there. But I still kind of do that in the mornings. I just kind of sit and do nothing.
Yeah.
Waking up, I'll have my coffee and I'll just sit and literally do nothing. Unless I wake up on a day where it's like my mind is racing and I have all these ideas, I'm just kind of like, whatever. So it really can look like anything.
I love that. I think I'm so glad you mentioned that, because this is one of the most important things I think that we could agree on too, is like these practices in the morning, because it's when, right, like you're still coming out of your sleep, and so you're most kind of tapped into like that dream state or that otherworldly sort of state. And so I think when, you know, when a lot of people like have to wake up to an alarm clock, and then right away they're just on this autopilot of like alarm, shower, get ready, get in the car, go to work, and they're setting up their day to serve everyone else versus themselves. And you know, that's really something that I'm so passionate about, is these morning practices, because you're truly serving yourself and like making this ritual between
Yeah,
you and God first thing in the morning, so that you can go out into the world and share your voice and serve your community, whatever that looks like for you, from an overflowing cup.
totally. And you can train your body, because honestly, when I played golf, I'd have 7 o'clock tea time. I'd have to be up at the crack of dawn. I'm talking like 4 o'clock in the morning. But I still implemented this into my routine, because I was like, I'm not going to show up to the golf course and be stressed and feeling rushed. I want to show up with that same ease. And yeah, I eventually would train my body. I'd like, tomorrow I want to wake up at 4, and it just wake up at 4. And if I'm like, tomorrow I want to wake up at 5, obviously I was in more of a routine. Probably if tomorrow I said, okay, wake up at 5, it would probably be like, no. But it was like, I feel like there's ways of still programming your body or programming yourself to, even if you're working a 9 to 5 job, to wake up and just start your day on a good note. It makes all the difference. It really does.
You know, and that's just going to overflow into all of your relationships, you know, and you really can't pour from an empty cup, you know. And I would just encourage people to really, you know, on the surface, I guess it kind of sounds selfish, but at the same time, if you're not being selfish in this way, like you're not serving anyone else either. And so to really make that a priority, especially if you're wanting to, you know, really tap into your abilities, and, you know, if you're loving everything that we're talking about and really wanting to like, okay, this sounds like a great like lifestyle, like that's what I want to, like, you really have to put your well-being and your connection with the divine, like the top priority of your life.
And also owning that, because look at how that guy shifted around and just started being like, here's your smoothie. I'm going to go in here, make our plan for the day. You just sit there and enjoy your smoothie. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Like this is such a good topic too for anyone who's listening who is like single right now and they want to, you know, attract the one. And it's probably great also for, you know, listeners to know at this time, like both Jen and I were both single. We both, you know, have our own places. Like we're in these like great positions where we're kind of like, we're building our business, we're growing our audiences. And we're like open to love, but we're also really focused in on like our greater purpose. And so I think that's like a really cool thing to share with people so they know exactly where we're at. And kind of say to anyone who's listening is like, if you are single right now, like this is such a powerful opportunity for you to really implement your spiritual practices into your life, because everyone knows when they fall in love or when they get into a relationship, it's really easy to like, just, you know, you're falling in love with somebody. And so it's easy to kind of like, you know, set aside some of the things that are important to you. And so this is just a really important time to like embed, ingrain, like really solidify the parts of your life that will become non-negotiable when you get into a relationship.
Oh, totally agree. I feel like I've been doing a lot of shadow work on my own relationship stuff while being here alone, because I'm like, yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff, but that'll have to be for a different podcast. Because
totally, oh my God, that's like so many podcasts.
Yeah, because I could go on forever. But I definitely have been very aware of my shadow aspects during this time. But we're doing the work. We're facing them head on, because right now, more than ever, is the best time to choose that love feeling, choose to move away from fear, because we're moving into a new time in the world. I think here with this age of Aquarius, it's like we want everybody to be on the path of ascension. Everybody should level up, and I feel like even in my readings I'm seeing that there's this fork happening, and it's like some people are going to get left behind. Some people are going to get left behind, and don't miss the bus. There'll be other buses, but jump on this one.
Oh, I'm so glad you're saying this, because that's such an important thing for people to understand, is like whether you call it 5D, Ascension, like whatever resonates for you, but it's like you cannot pull someone into like spiritual expansion without them doing the work themselves. Like you might want to feel like, now that you're waking up, it's like, oh my God, like I need to tell everybody, I need to bring all these people with me. And it's like, been there, done that, does not work.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for people to understand, is like, you cannot force people to do this work, because it's intense.
It is. And it's just, everybody has to do it in their right time. I think in the live, somebody had asked me, and we're going to talk about a whole lot about twin flames in another podcast that's probably going to be released at the same time as this one. But somebody had asked me, they're like, how do I tell my twin flame that he's my twin flame? I'm like, you don't.
Yeah. Oh my God.
You let them figure that out for themselves.
Totally.
So yeah, that'll be a whole nother podcast.
Oh my God.
Where we talk about twin flames. But yeah, this is kind of like, you know, exactly what you said. It's like, I'm going to get on this flight out. I'll see you when you get there.
Right? Exactly. And you know what? If you have plans to go somewhere else, that's cool too. Like that's kind of the energy you have to have around all relationships right now, is like everyone's so deeply on their own path, and you just have to trust that those who are resonant with you, like you're on it together, just like, Jen and I have kind of synced up. And I think you just have to really honor that, like, the relationships that are falling away, it's because like they're just not meant to go with you in this next chapter.
Totally. And if they're meant to circle back, they will. I've had people who have come back into my life after like 10 years, people who I've had, terrible fights with, that after like 5 or 6 years, I'm like, how young and stupid I was, that I'll just reach out to and be like, hey, I'm going to be in town. And it's like, great, let's meet up. It doesn't always have to be these terrible things. Like, people grow, and I think we have to allow people to grow sometimes. It's part of our own growth, is to trust that. That's probably another podcast episode. You see, guys, we have so many things to talk about, so make sure to subscribe.
Yeah. If this is literally just like an appetizer of all of the entrees to come.
Yeah, because I just feel like we're not even gonna run out, because I've already just picked up on like 10 more ideas. So we're so excited to keep this going. We're so excited to start sharing more and just talking more about stuff that we're so passionate about, eventually having guests on here and just providing you guys with information and little tidbits about our own personal experiences in hopes that it helps you with yours. So I think we're going to wrap up this episode, but be sure to check out for a nice little twin flame love karmic relationship one coming out.
I love it. This was so much fun, and I just can't wait to dive into all of our topics to come. And I'm so grateful for all of you who are tuning in. And if you loved this, make sure to subscribe and follow us on the social medias and all the things.
Okay, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us over on Instagram at Modern Life Mystic Woman, where we're sharing inspirational writing and magical lifestyle tips on the daily.
And if you loved this show, let us know. Subscribe, comment, shoot us a DM, whatever your style, and make sure to share it with all your spiritual besties.
See you next time.